Your mind hasn't stopped all day. Even now, something is already running in the background. A thought about what you should be doing. A worry that crept in before you even noticed it. Thoughts that won't wait their turn. A quiet voice rehearsing something that hasn't happened yet. And you're tired, not from your day, from your own head. You know what's happening. You've known for a while. The thinking won't stop. And no matter what you try, it just keeps going. You can't think your way out. You can't reason your way to stillness. And the more you try to stop the spiral, the louder it gets. That's not weakness. That's not failure. That's the untrained mind doing exactly what it was built to do. And you're not alone in this. Buddhism has understood this exact pattern for a very long time. And what it says about why your mind keeps working against you might be the most clarifying thing you hear today. That's what we're going to look at together. The Buddha said, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Most people hear that as pressure. Think better thoughts. Try harder. Want peace more intensely. But that's not what he was pointing at. He was pointing at something much deeper. He was pointing at the relationship between you and your thinking, because there's a version of you that watches the thoughts arrive, and there's a version of you that becomes every single one of them. And right now, most of the time, you're becoming them. Every thought that lands, you treat like a message from headquarters, like it arrived because it's true. Like it needs your full attention right now. Like something will go wrong if you don't immediately respond. And so the mind keeps generating and you keep responding, and the cycle runs all day with no off switch in sight. Buddhism has a word for this untrained pattern, papanka. It means mental proliferation. The way a single thought becomes a story, becomes a spiral, becomes a whole world inside your head that feels more real than the room you're sitting in. You know exactly how this works. You get one worry, and 5 minutes later, you're solving a problem that hasn't happened yet, rehearsing a conversation with someone who hasn't spoken, bracing for an outcome that may never arrive. That's papanka. That's overthinking at its root. The mind doing the only thing it was ever shown. Not because it wants to exhaust you, but because no one ever showed it another way. And the way papancha sustains itself is through your response. Every time you engage with a thought, every time you argue with it, analyze it, follow it, you make it louder, not soft. You add weight to something that was already heavy. And then you wonder why. You feel more depleted after thinking than you did before it started. This is why trying to think your way out of anxious thinking almost never works. You're adding fuel to a fire and hoping it cools on its own, but it doesn't. And somewhere in you, you already know this. You've tried talking yourself out of the spiral. You've tried replacing the bad thought with a better one. You've tried reasoning with the worry, as if it were someone who could be persuaded. And sometimes it works for a moment, and then it comes back. Because the problem was never the thought. The problem is the belief that every thought deserves a response. That every thought that arrives in your mind is meaningful, real, and worth acting on. That's the belief that keeps the spiral going, not the thoughts themselves. And that's where it gets harder, because even when you understand this, the pattern doesn't just stop. You can know intellectually that you're caught in a mental loop and still be completely inside the loop 30 seconds later. That's not irrationality. That's the nature of deeply conditioned habit. The mind has been running this pattern for years, maybe decades. It's not going to change because you read something interesting about it once. Change at this level happens slowly, through repetition, through small moments of noticing that gradually, over time, add up to a different relationship with your own mind. Buddhism understood this long before modern psychology caught up. The path the Buddha laid out was never about sudden transformation. It was always about patient and consistent practice, small shifts, day after day, until the relationship between you and your thinking starts to look fundamentally different. This is where Buddhism points to something called the second arrow. The first arrow is what happens to you. A difficult thought arises. A worry shows up. Something uncomfortable passes through. That's the first arrow. It lands and it stings. But then, almost immediately, you shoot yourself with a second arrow. Why am I thinking this? What's wrong with me? I shouldn't feel this way. I thought I was past this. The second arrow is almost always more painful than the first. And this is important. The second arrow is the one you choose, not consciously, but it's the one that comes from habit. The habit of fighting your own mind. The habit of deciding that the discomfort shouldn't be there. The habit of adding a layer of judgment on top of every difficult experience. And that layer, that second arrow, is almost always heavier than the original thing you were carrying. Buddhism's teaching on compassion, karuna, speaks directly to this. Compassion in the Buddhist sense is not just what you extend to others. It is what you learn to extend to yourself. And it starts here with the second arrow, with the moment you notice that you're not just in pain. You're angry at yourself for being in pain, not just worried. You're ashamed of still being worried. Karuna asks you to pause at that exact moment, not to fix the feeling, not to make it smaller, but to meet it with warmth rather than judgment. Because the mind that's already struggling does not heal faster when you turn against it. It heals faster when you stop making it the enemy. You know this feeling. You've been here before. You've felt the spiral begin. And instead of pausing, you leaned in. You started to wonder what it meant. You built a case. You searched for the reason why this keeps happening. And before long, the original thought was gone, and you were somewhere deeper and darker, somewhere you didn't intend to go. That's the second arrow, working the way it always works. And it's so fast, so familiar, that most of the time you don't notice it. You only feel the weight after it's already landed. So what does an untrained mind look like in an ordinary day? It looks like this. You wake up, and before your feet hit the floor, something is already running. A thought about what's ahead, a feeling left over from yesterday, a quiet dread you can't quite name. And you spend the first hour managing it, pushing it down, covering it with noise, with your phone, with the rhythm of getting ready, with anything that keeps you from having to sit still, with what's already there. By midday, you're running low, not from what you've done, but from what your mind has done. The constant processing, the constant scanning for what might go wrong, the constant replaying of what already has, the noise inside a head that was never taught how to be quiet. By evening, you're tired in a way that rest doesn't fully fix, because the tired isn't just in your body, it's in the relationship you have with your own thinking. And that kind of tired follows you into the morning. Buddhism offers a different way of understanding the mind, not as something to be silenced, not as something to be dominated or controlled. The Buddha used the image of a rider on a horse. The horse is powerful. It will move. It will startle. It will sometimes want to run in a direction you didn't choose. But the skilled rider doesn't fight the horse, doesn't try to stop it from being what it is. The rider learns to move with it, to hold lightly, to guide without forcing. Your mind is the horse. Trying to stop it from thinking is like trying to stop a living thing from breathing. That's not the practice. The practice is learning to ride, to be present with the movement without being thrown by it. And here's what nobody tells you about this. The goal is not a quiet mind. The goal is a mind you stop fighting. Those are not the same thing. A quiet mind sounds like the absence of thought, a room with no noise. Stillness you have to manufacture, but the practice doesn't lead there. What it leads to is something more useful, the ability to watch a thought arise without being hijacked by it, to feel a worry land without immediately building a court case around it, to notice what your mind is doing and not have to follow it every single time it moves. That's not a quiet mind. That's a free mind. And freedom from the spiral doesn't require the spiral to stop. It just requires you to stop climbing in. This is where mindfulness enters, not as a performance, not as a technique you complete and set aside, as a fundamental shift in how you hold your own experience. The Pali word is sati. It means clear seeing, awareness of what is actually present, as distinct from awareness of the story. Your mind is already building about what's present, and most of the time, you're not experiencing your life. You're experiencing your mind's commentary on your life, and those are not the same thing. The conversation you had this morning, you've already run it through interpretation, added meaning, subtracted nuance, built a conclusion, and now you're not responding to what happened. You're responding to the version your mind constructed. Sati is the practice of pausing before that version takes full control, just for a moment, long enough to notice this is what happened. This is what my mind is saying about it. And those are two different things. One is real, the other is a story. And you have more say in what you do with the story than you've been taught to believe. Buddhism's teaching on wisdom, prajna, is inseparable from this. Wisdom, in the Buddhist sense, is not knowing more. It's seeing more clearly, seeing that the spiral is not the truth, seeing that the second arrow is a choice, seeing that the noise inside your head is not an accurate map of your life. Prajna builds slowly, not through accumulation of knowledge, but through repeated moments of recognition. You notice the spiral starting. That's prajna. You catch yourself shooting the second arrow. That's prajna. You feel the familiar tightening of anxiety, and you pause instead of diving in. That's prajna. Small moments, repeated over time, building something that starts to feel, eventually, like genuine understanding from the inside. Not as a concept, as lived experience, as something you actually know in your body, rather than just your head. There's a reason your mind keeps looping. It loops because somewhere it believes the loop is keeping you safe. It replays the conversation because it's trying to fix it. It rehearses the worst case scenario because it's trying to protect you from it. It keeps scanning the horizon because that's what it was trained to do in a world that sometimes required that kind of vigilance. Your mind is not your enemy. It's doing the job it was trained to do by years of experience in uncertain conditions. The problem isn't that it's trying. The problem is that the strategy stopped working a long time ago. Worrying about the future does not protect you from it. Replaying the past does not heal it. And being at war with your own mind does not bring peace. It just produces more war, more exhaustion, more of the exact tired feeling that brought you to this moment right now. What makes this so disorienting is that the mind's patterns feel like personality. They feel like you. When you replay a conversation for the 10th time, it doesn't feel like a habit. It feels like concern, like responsibility, like something that just needs a little more attention. When you anticipate the worst, it doesn't feel like fear running on autopilot. It feels like being realistic, like being prepared, like being someone who takes life seriously. The mind is very good at dressing its patterns in the language of virtue. And that's what makes the untrained mind so hard to see. Not because it's hidden, but because it looks from the inside like just another reasonable response to life. Buddhism keeps pointing at this because the first step out of the spiral is recognizing that you're in one. Not blaming yourself for being in one, not adding a second arrow to the recognition itself. Just seeing it with clarity, with a quality of steady attention that doesn't need the pattern to be wrong in order to notice it. There's something the Buddhist concept of anicca, impermanence, brings to this understanding. Anicca means that nothing is fixed, nothing stays. Every thought that arises will also pass. Every state of mind, however intense, is temporary. Even this one, even the spiral you're in right now, not because you force it away, but because everything moves, everything changes. That's not a consolation. That's the actual nature of things. And when you feel it, when you actually experience it, not just know it, something loosens. The thought feels less like a permanent verdict. The worry feels less like solid ground. The spiral feels less like the whole truth and more like a weather pattern, real while it's here, temporary by nature. And you are not the weather. You are the sky it moves through. That distinction is the beginning of genuine peace. Not peace as the absence of difficulty, peace as the recognition that difficulty does not define you. You're beginning to see this differently. And once you see it, you can't fully go back. You start to catch the spiral earlier. You start to feel the moment just before you shoot the second arrow. And in that moment, that small, quiet space between the thought arriving and the reaction beginning, there is something available to you. Not a solution, not a technique, just a pause. Just enough room to recognize what's happening before you're already inside it. And that recognition, repeated often enough, changes the relationship. Slowly, the way a river changes the shape of stone. Not dramatically, not all at once, but unmistakably over time. This is what the practice actually looks like in a day. Not sitting in meditation for hours while your life waits outside. Not achieving some elevated state that needs to be maintained. It looks like this. A thought arrives that would normally spiral, and instead of climbing in, you notice it. You name it, even silently. There's the worry. There's the replay. There's the mind doing what it does, and you let it pass. Not every time, not perfectly, but more often than before. And each time, you reinforce a different pattern. A pattern of watching rather than becoming, of holding lightly rather than gripping, of returning to what's actually here rather than getting lost in what might be, of trusting that you don't have to solve every thought to be okay. And over time, the mind that was working against you starts to feel like something you live with rather than something you have to constantly survive. The Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. That's easy to hear as a platitude, but it's pointing at something very practical. The peace you're looking for is not waiting for the circumstances to align. It's not waiting until the anxiety is gone. The problem is solved. The hard thing is finally behind you. It's available right now, not as an emotion you manufacture, not as a state you perform, as a recognition that the noise in your head is not the whole of who you are, that there is something in you that is not caught in the spiral, something that can watch your thoughts without following them, something that has been present all along. That part of you is already still. That part of you doesn't need to be fixed. It just needs to be found. And it's found not through effort, but through the kind of quiet, honest attention that mindfulness keeps pointing toward. And this is worth sitting with for a moment because it runs counter to almost everything you've been told about how to handle a difficult mind. The cultural message is relentless. Fix it, improve it, optimize it, solve it. There are apps for it, courses for it, endless content promising to finally teach you how to get your mind under control. And none of it is wrong, exactly. But all of it misses the first step. The first step is not fixing. The first step is understanding. Understanding that the mind that runs patterns is not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what any mind does when it's never been shown another way. That shift in understanding from broken to untrained is not just semantic. It changes how you approach the whole thing because you don't fight something you understand. You work with it. You learn its patterns. You start to recognize what it does. Under pressure, under uncertainty, under fatigue. And that recognition, slow, patient, consistent, is what actually changes the ground beneath you. Not a new system, not a better technique, just a different quality of attention brought to what's already there. So where does this leave you today? Not with a new system to follow, not with a list of steps to complete, with something simpler and something that lasts longer. A shift in how you meet your own mind, because the mind that's been running against you has never needed to be defeated. It is only needed to be understood. It's not wrong for the patterns it runs. It's just untrained. And training it doesn't start with force. It starts with recognition. The moment you see the spiral beginning and you don't immediately climb in, that's the beginning. One breath taken before the reaction. One pause between the thought and the meaning you assign it. One small moment of noticing instead of becoming. That's enough to start. That's how this kind of change actually moves. Not in a rush, not overnight, but steadily. One moment of awareness at a time, in an ordinary day, in an ordinary breath, when the mind does what it does, and you just watch it, instead of getting lost inside it. And that's the thing about all of this. The mind that works against you doesn't become your ally through willpower. It becomes your ally through understanding, through compassion, through the slow, patient practice of meeting your own experience without always reaching for a way out. You don't have to win this. You don't have to figure it all out today. You don't have to silence the noise. You just have to stop adding weight to what's already there. One recognition at a time. One gentle pause. One breath. That's enough. That's where it starts. And that's everything. If this is the kind of reflection that slows you down in a good way, there's more here for you. New videos go up regularly on this channel, each one built around the same quiet idea that you are closer to peace than the noise in your head would have you believe. Subscribe if that's something you want more of, and we'll keep going together.